My family held a concern meeting about my safety and presented nursing home brochures. They didn't know I'd been recording every conversation for 6 months and had already sent the files to Senator Patricia Walsh, my former law student. The meeting was scheduled for a Sunday afternoon in my own living room in Chicago's Lincoln Park neighborhood. They'd all coordinated their arrivals, my son Daniel, my daughter Linda, and their spouses, creating an atmosphere of unified concern that was as theatrical as it was transparent. I sat in my favorite wingback chair, the one Harold bought me for our 30th anniversary, and watched them arrange themselves strategically around the room. Daniel positioned himself by the fireplace, assuming the stance of authority. Linda perched on the couch with a folder thick with documents. Their spouses, Mark and Jennifer, flanked them like supporting actors in a play they'd clearly rehearsed. "Mom," Daniel began, his voice carrying that particular tone of condescension wrapped in concern, "we need to talk about your future." I nodded pleasantly, my hand resting on the arm of my chair, where 6 months ago, I'd had my former student Tommy Chen install a recording device no bigger than a button. Every room in my house had them now. Tiny, undetectable, voice-activated, and streaming directly to a secure cloud server. "We're worried about you living alone," Linda added, opening her folder with practiced precision. "You're 81 years old. This house has 3 floors, steep stairs, and you're so isolated here." Isolated. I lived in a $2 million brownstone in one of Chicago's most desirable neighborhoods, with neighbors on both sides who checked on me daily, a grocery store 2 blocks away, and perfect mobility thanks to my daily yoga practice that I'd maintained for 30 years. "We found some wonderful options," Daniel said, pulling out glossy brochures. "Sunshine Manor is the premier assisted living facility in the suburbs. They have medical staff on site 24/7, organized activities, and most importantly, you'll be safe." I picked up one of the brochures, noting the $8,000 monthly fee in small print. "This looks expensive," I observed mildly. "Don't worry about the cost," Linda said quickly. "The sale of this house would more than cover it. In fact, there would be plenty left over to ensure you're comfortable for the rest of your life." There it was, the heart of the matter. This house, purchased for $50,000 in 1968, now valued at over $2 million. The house they'd been circling like vultures since Harold died 5 years ago. Mark, Daniel's husband, pulled out his phone. "We've been documenting some concerning incidents, Eleanor," he said, scrolling through what appeared to be a detailed log. "On March 15th, you left the stove on for 3 hours," he read. "March 22nd, you fell in the garden. April 3rd, you got confused at the grocery store and couldn't remember your PIN. April 18th, you called Linda at 2 a.m., disoriented and frightened." I listened to this fabricated litany with interest. On March 15th, I'd been at a Chicago Symphony Orchestra board meeting. I was still an active member. March 22nd, I'd been planting my spring bulbs, kneeling in the garden beds, not falling. April 3rd's grocery store confusion was me disputing a price discrepancy with the manager, and I had never called Linda at 2 a.m. in my life. I barely called her at 2 p.m. "We've also spoken with Dr. Morrison," Jennifer added, producing a letter on medical letterhead. "He's provided a cognitive assessment recommendation based on our observations." Dr. Morrison was Daniel's golf buddy, not my physician. My actual doctor, Rebecca Chen, had given me a clean bill of health just 2 weeks prior, including perfect scores on cognitive assessments I'd requested specifically because I'd sensed this ambush coming. "Your neighbors have expressed concerns too," Linda lied smoothly. "Mrs. Patterson mentioned you've been acting strangely, talking to yourself in the garden. Mrs. Patterson and I had been discussing her heritage roses over the fence. We'd been having the same garden conversations for 20 years. "I see you've put considerable thought into this," I said calmly. "May I have some time to review these materials?" "Mom, we think it's best if we move quickly," Daniel pressed. "Sunshine Manor has an opening now, but these spots don't last long. We could have you settled by the end of the month." The end of the month was 10 days away. 10 days to remove me from my home, sell everything I'd built with Harold, and pocket the proceeds while warehousing me in a facility where, according to my research, residents had a median survival rate of 18 months. What my family didn't know was that this wasn't the first concerning conversation I'd recorded. 6 months earlier, I'd overheard Daniel on the phone in my kitchen during Thanksgiving dinner. "The old bird is sitting on at least $2 million in real estate alone," he'd said, not realizing I'd come back for my reading glasses, "plus whatever else she's hoarding. Linda and I have power of attorney if she's declared incompetent. Dr. Morrison says he can help with that." That conversation had prompted my call to Tommy Chen, now a cybersecurity expert, and Patricia Walsh, my former law student, who'd become an Illinois state senator championing elder rights. Together, we'd devised a plan to document what Patricia immediately recognized as a conspiracy to commit elder fraud. The recordings from the past 6 months painted a clear picture. There was Linda at a coffee shop with Jennifer, discussing how to manage mom's assets more effectively once she's placed. There was Daniel meeting with a real estate developer who was interested in my property for a condo development. There was Mark researching involuntary commitment procedures Illinois on his laptop during a visit, his screen visible to the camera I'd had installed facing the living room desk. Most damning was a recording from 2 weeks ago, when they'd met at Daniel's house to rehearse this very intervention. They'd role-played different scenarios, practiced their concerned expressions, and even discussed what to do if I resisted. If she fights it, we go with Plan B, Daniel had said. Dr. Morrison will sign the psychiatric hold papers, 72 hours for evaluation, and with the right documentation, we can extend it indefinitely. 3 months ago, I'd met with Patricia Walsh in her office. She'd listened to the recordings with growing anger, her pen flying across her legal pad as she took notes. Mrs. Hartley, she'd said, using my formal name despite having called me Eleanor for years when she was my student. This is a coordinated attempt at elder fraud, false imprisonment, and conspiracy to commit financial exploitation. These are serious federal crimes. I know, I'd replied. I taught you about them, remember? Criminal law, spring semester 1987. She'd smiled at that. You gave me a B+ on my paper about elder abuse, said it needed more research into financial motivation. Consider this your extra credit opportunity, I'd said. Patricia had connected me with the Illinois Department on Aging's investigative unit. They'd been particularly interested because Daniel and Linda had apparently done this before, to Mark's mother 3 years ago. She'd been placed in a facility and died within 6 months, her estate liquidated before she passed. The investigator, a sharp young woman named Ashley Brennan, had been building a case but needed more evidence. My recordings provided that evidence in abundance. The morning of the concern meeting, I'd sent Patricia a message. They're moving today, 2 p.m. my residence. She'd responded immediately. Investigation team on standby. Document everything. Do not sign anything. Help is ready. Patricia had done more than just investigate. She'd used her Senate connections to flag my case with Adult Protective Services, ensuring that any attempt to remove me from my home would trigger immediate law enforcement response. She'd also connected me with the best elder law attorney in Chicago, Samuel Roth, who'd helped me restructure my assets in an irrevocable trust that neither Daniel nor Linda could touch, even with power of attorney. But I hadn't told my children any of this. I wanted them to reveal themselves fully, to commit completely to their scheme. Patricia had assured me that the more evidence we gathered, the stronger the case would be, not just for me but for other elderly persons facing similar exploitation. As I sat in my living room that Sunday, listening to my children explain why I needed to be institutionalized, I thought about Patricia's words from our last meeting. They're counting on your isolation, Eleanor. They think being old means being helpless. They're about to learn what happens when you mess with a law professor who taught half the legal community in Illinois. I need to use the restroom, I announced suddenly, standing up with deliberate unsteadiness. Linda jumped up. Let me help you, Mom. No need, I said, then added with calculated confusion. It's just down the hall, right? Or is it upstairs? I saw the look they exchanged. Gotcha. More evidence of my deterioration. I made my way to the bathroom, taking my time, and sent a pre-written text to Patricia, green light. When I returned to the living room 10 minutes later, Daniel had spread out legal documents on the coffee table. Mom, we've prepared some paperwork to make this transition easier, he said. Just some simple power of attorney modifications and a consent form for Sunshine Manor. I picked up the documents, pretending to struggle with reading them. I don't have my reading glasses, I said. That's okay, Linda said quickly. We can explain everything. Just sign here, here, and here. I should probably have my lawyer look at these, I suggested. Mom, we are your family. We're looking out for you, Daniel said with barely concealed frustration. Lawyers will just complicate things and delay your care. I was about to respond when the doorbell rang. I'll get it, Mark offered, but I was already moving. It's my house, I said firmly. I'll answer my own door. I opened it to find Ashley Brennan, the investigator from the Department on Aging, along with 2 Chicago police officers and Patricia Walsh herself. Good afternoon, Mrs. Hartley, Ashley said formally, holding up her badge. We received a report of potential elder abuse at this address. May we come in? The look on my family's faces when law enforcement walked into the living room was almost worth the 6 months of deception they'd put me through. Daniel went pale. Linda's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Their spouses simultaneously reached for their phones. I wouldn't do that, one of the officers said calmly. We're going to need everyone to remain seated while we sort this out. Patricia Walsh entered last, her presence commanding the room. My children recognized her immediately. She'd been in the news frequently for her elder rights legislation. Senator Walsh? Daniel stammered. What are you doing here? I'm here as a friend of your mother's, Patricia said smoothly. Eleanor was my constitutional law professor at Northwestern. Brilliant woman. Sharp as ever, wouldn't you say? She pulled out a tablet and connected it to my television. Mrs. Hartley has been kind enough to share some concerning recordings with our office. Would you like to hear them? Without waiting for an answer, she hit play. Daniel's voice filled the room. The old bird is sitting on at least $2 million in real estate alone. Then Linda. Once she's in the facility, we can clean out this place properly. God knows what valuables she's hoarding. Then Mark, researching involuntary commitment procedures. And finally, their rehearsal of today's intervention, complete with the fabricated incidents and plans for forced psychiatric holds. These recordings, Patricia said as my children sat in stunned silence, along with the fraudulent medical documents you've prepared, and the false reports you've made to neighbors and medical professionals, constitute elder fraud, conspiracy, and attempted false imprisonment. These are federal crimes. Ashley Brennan stepped forward. We've also discovered this isn't your first attempt. Mark's mother, Dorothy Phillips, was subjected to similar treatment 3 years ago. We've reopened that investigation. Linda burst into tears. Mom, we were just worried about you. No, I said, my voice steady and clear. You were worried about my money. There's a difference. Daniel tried to salvage the situation. This is all a misunderstanding. We're family. Mom, tell them this is just a misunderstanding. I stood up, my full height, my steady posture probably surprising them given the frail act they'd expected me to maintain. A misunderstanding, I repeated. You fabricated medical conditions. You conspired with a doctor to have me declared incompetent. You were prepared to force me into a facility against my will to steal my home and assets. That's not a misunderstanding, Daniel. That's a crime. Patricia pulled out a thick folder. Mrs. Hartley has filed for restraining orders against all of you. You are no longer permitted within 500 feet of her or her property. Any power of attorney privileges have been revoked. Her assets have been placed in a protected trust that you cannot access. Furthermore, Ashley Brennan added, the state of Illinois is pressing charges. You'll be receiving summons within the week. I suggest you all obtain criminal defense attorneys. You can't be serious, Mark protested. We're her family. Family doesn't plot to steal from their elders, Patricia said coldly. Family doesn't fabricate mental illness to institutionalize their parents. Family doesn't rehearse interventions designed to strip away someone's autonomy and dignity. The officers stood. We'll need you all to leave the premises now, one said, and surrender any keys to this property. One by one, they handed over their keys. Keys I'd given them in love and trust. Keys they'd planned to use to empty my home while I was locked away in Sunshine Manor. As they filed out, Linda turned back, mascara streaming down her face. Mom, how could you do this to us? I didn't do anything to you, I replied. I simply refused to let you do it to me. There's a difference. I taught you that difference when you were young, but apparently you forgot. Consider this your refresher course. After they left, Patricia and I sat in my quiet living room. The investigators had taken copies of all the recordings and documents. The legal process would move forward without my direct involvement now. You know they'll probably avoid jail time, Patricia said gently. First offense, family situation, good lawyers. They'll likely get probation and fines. I know, I said, but they've lost something more valuable than their freedom. They've lost their inheritance, their reputation, and their mother. I've already changed my will. Everything goes to charity now, specifically to organizations that protect elderly people from their own families. Patricia squeezed my hand. You did the right thing, Eleanor. How many elderly people don't have the resources, the connections, or the mental acuity to fight back? Your case will help protect them. 6 months later, Daniel and Linda took plea deals. They received 2 years probation, substantial fines, and were required to complete 200 hours of community service at ironically, senior centers. Mark was charged separately for his mother's case. Jennifer, who had played a smaller role, received a lighter sentence but still faced consequences. The recordings became part of Patricia's push for stronger elder protection laws in Illinois. She named it Eleanor's Law, legislation that made it easier for elderly people to document and report familial abuse. I still live in my brownstone. I still tend my garden. I still attend symphony board meetings. But now I have new locks, new security systems, and new peace of mind. My neighbors, who were horrified to learn what my children had attempted, check on me more frequently, out of genuine care, not manufactured concern. Sometimes I think about Daniel and Linda, wonder if they understand what they lost in their greed. They lost a mother who would have given them anything they asked for honestly, who had already planned generous inheritances for them both. Instead, they'll get nothing but the memory of the day their elderly mother outsmarted their criminal conspiracy, with the help of a former student who remembered what I taught her about justice. My family held a concern meeting about my safety and presented nursing home brochures. They didn't know I'd been recording every conversation for 6 months and had already sent the files to Senator Patricia Walsh, my former law student. In the end, the only ones who needed institutionalizing were my children, and the institution was the criminal justice system. The house they wanted to steal remains mine, and I remain free, exactly as Harold and I always intended.